Welcome, everybody. I am super excited to have you on the show today. Today is a very special episode. I'm going to introduce our guest here in just a moment. But for those of you who don't know me, and maybe this is your first time joining me live, I just want to introduce myself really quick. I am a life coach, entrepreneur, and a presidential diamond with doTERRA Essential Oils. And my entire goal in life is to help people wake up, find their voice, and become fully alive. All right, so let me just make sure I got Allison. Hey, Allison.
Hey.
Oh my gosh, this is so fun. Okay, so let me, I'm going to move my camera because for whatever reason, I got to go this way. It always moves when I have a guest on. Okay, so guys, Allison Fallon is one of my absolute dearest friends. And I have a lot of amazing friends, and that's not the reason that I wanted her to be on the show, even though that would be enough reason for her to be here. But Allison is a speaker. She is an author. She is a creative coach. She's actually the one that helped me map out and outline my entire book. But one of the things that I love about her is that she is incredibly passionate about helping women in their relationships, help them come into the power that already exists inside of themselves, and uncover what truly makes them unique and remarkable. So Allison is somebody who's so full of life. When you meet her, like, her energy is so contagious. You guys really get this on the interview today. But Allison, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor. Thanks for that introduction too. You're sweet.
Oh my gosh. Well, you do so much. I mean, you really are. I mean, you have your own online courses. You run your own retreats. You help authors write their books. You coach. I kind of feel like you were a midwife for people who are like going through this creative process.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
That's what you do. It's like you take somebody's idea and you flesh it out and actually make it happen, which is so cool. Well, I want to get straight into it. Okay, so they're saying my volume is a little bit low compared to yours. Okay, Vicki, will you let me know if that is better? This is why, we get to practice all these different things.
Do you want me to turn my volume down at all? Would that help or?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. We'll try that. This is just, all part of the
give it a shot.
Experience. Okay, so why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your story, because you have gone through such a, I would say, fairly recent experience with heartbreak and really coming back into who you are and really, noticing all of your potential and taking responsibility for your life. So why don't you go ahead and share with everybody your journey through the past year?
Yeah. So you mentioned it's recent. It's funny because I look back now, it has been just a little bit over a year, almost 18 months now, which is a little bit of time, but it's recent enough that this is the first time I've really talked about it publicly. I've written about it a tiny bit on my blog, but anyway, so you may even get a little bit emotional. It's the first time I've really talked about it publicly, but about a year and a half ago, so November of 2015, my life took a major left turn. I was not expecting this. I found a piece of information that led to several other pieces of information that essentially within the course of 24 hours ended my marriage. And I had been married almost exactly 4 years at the time. I was planning a vacation for our 4-year anniversary with my husband. We had a dog together. We had multiple businesses together. Nobody gets married thinking that they're going to get divorced. So I think I can, but I can say definitively that this was so far out of left field for me. I did not see this coming, did not expect that this was going to happen. And this is a week before Thanksgiving at the end of 2015. So, it just completely for a few months derailed me. Everything that I thought I was working for, everything I thought I was building, now all of a sudden felt like it had been yanked out from underneath of me. And I just kept asking myself, like, how does a person even keep moving forward with something like this? And, I say that it was out of left field, and it was, but at the same time, the other really devastating part about this tragedy for me was that this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. It wasn't the first time a relationship had ended because of a dishonesty. It wasn't the first time a relationship had ended because of an infidelity. It wasn't the first time that my heart had been broken by someone I had trusted. And so that question for me was lingering really closely, which was like, how did I get here again? You know, how is this happening to me again? Is there something wrong with me? Did I do something to make this happen? You know, and so just wrestling with all those questions and feeling really devastated. And at the same time, trying to put the pieces of my life back together and just trying to survive and get through from day to day. How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to pay my mortgage? What's going to happen with the house? What's going to happen with my things? What's going to happen with the dog? What's going to happen with our marriage? Will we ever speak again? Will we ever be friends? You know, all these things that are going through your mind. So, you know, I gave myself a little bit of time to just survive, just get through the day, just get out of bed. You know, I would really encourage myself to just get in the shower, just eat a meal, just take care of yourself, just go to yoga, just survive, just get through today, pay your bills. And then there came a point when I decided, you know, the question that kept pressing on me was, how did you get here? How did I get here? And so I decided that I was going to do anything I could to answer that question. I was really going to figure it out. So I did a couple things. I mean, I started buying books and reading books about love and romance and heartbreak and attachment styles and, you know, anything I could find. I kind of geek out on psychology stuff. So my dad's a therapist. I grew up around that kind of stuff. So I get really excited about that. So I was just ordering, you know, I would order a book on Amazon and then the 4 other books that it would give me as recommendations, I would order those too. They were all really, really obscure books. So I started reading tons of books. I got myself into therapy. I had already been seeing a therapist sort of sporadically, but I started seeing my therapist more regularly. I asked if I could come in twice a week. There's a place in Nashville, right outside of Nashville in Tennessee, called Onsite that does a week-long therapy retreat. And
awesome.
It's amazing. I had been once before and I made it a priority to go again because it had been so helpful for me the first time, had really catapulted me. So, and it's not cheap. And it was not swimming in cash. I mean, I was paying for the divorce and, you know, just trying to survive. But I made it a number one priority to go to that retreat again because I knew how helpful it would be and how it set me up for my future. I started talking with friends. I started going to yoga more often, just really focusing on how can I take control over this situation. And the feeling was like, I never want to end up here again. So how can I take my own responsibility and accountability to make sure that this doesn't happen to me again? And I would have friends often say to me things like, and even my therapist at one point said to me, you know, it's surprising to me. She said, it's surprising to me how little blame you put on him. Like she said, you know, women will come in here who have been through something like you've been through, and they want to slash their husband's tires. They want to, you know, throw his stuff out the window. They want to like light it on fire. They, you know, these women who are just insanely angry. And she said, I don't get that energy of anger from you. She said, you know, she was trying to get me to tell her more about that, what that was about. And I think there's a piece of that. This is sort of a side note, but there's a piece of that where women in our culture are not taught how to be angry. I was not taught how to
Is that the truth?
I mean, so I needed some help, some scaffolding, some assistance in learning how to express my anger in a healthy way, learning that anger is not a negative emotion, that it's perfectly appropriate for me to be angry. And, you know, I think so many women struggle with that. So that was a piece of it for me. But on the other side of it, what I told her that day as I was sitting in her office was, you know, blame is a trade-off. I can blame him if I want. And culture would really support me in that because of the unique, you know, not unique, the common situation that I was in, the circumstances that I was in. I would have a lot of support if I decided I wanted to blame him and point out all the things that he had done wrong. And he was really the reason why this relationship had ended. And that was the narrative that I had carried with me from all these other relationships. And for me, this marriage was supposed to be the thing that changed all of that. You know, I had this narrative that I'd carried with me from dating relationship to dating relationship, which was like, what a jerk. I can't believe he did that. One day I'm going to meet a man who would never do anything like that to me, who's going to treat me the way that I deserve. And, you know, and when I was 28 when I met my husband, and when we got married, I thought like, oh, this is it. This is the moment that ends. You know, I have finally met the guy who's never going to treat me like that again. And then to find myself in this situation again was really, you know, heartbreaking in all those really deep, all the obvious ways. And then all those deeper ways, like, how did I end up back here again? And so I told her, I said, you know, I could blame him, but blame is a trade-off. So if I blame him, then what I give up is any agency or control I have to make any kind of meaningful or effective change for my future. So there was just a point when I remember thinking to myself, I am done. I'm done being miserable in my relationships, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make a change. So like I talked about, therapy, books, talking with friends, going to yoga, just being really super focused on my healing, my progress, moving forward. What does that look like for me? And it took really 12 months. I mean, I had a friend recommend to me that I set not a time limit, but a time amount. Like, this is the amount of time I'm going to spend really focusing on my healing. And I gave myself 12 months. So it took really 12 months of like intensive work before I got to the point where I was sort of like, okay, I feel like I'm starting to get a sense of the role I played in this. And it's delicate. It's a delicate balance, because I don't, what I don't want the message to be is that this was my fault, because it definitely wasn't my fault. But if we can figure out what role did I play, like what's happening on my side of the street, then suddenly we have gained all of this agency, control, power. We've leveraged all the emotional and spiritual power we have to make change in our lives. So I did that. Go ahead.
I want to pause you, because there's something that you said a second ago, and I don't want to lose it, because I want to touch on this a little bit. So, you know that saying, and I use this in coaching a lot, and they say, how you do one thing is how you do everything. Mm-hmm. And so you were starting to recognize these patterns, like, okay, this wasn't my first relationship where somebody was unfaithful to me. It wasn't my first relationship that ended. Do you think part of that, as you were going through this discovery process, had anything to do with your sense of self-worth?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I mean, and this is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned through this whole experience, is that when you look into the eyes of the people who you're in relationship with, and especially romantic relationships, is the hardest place to do it, but it's also the most powerful. What you see is yourself. So you see a mirror. It's like looking in a mirror. So how someone treats you usually gives you a pretty good idea of how you feel about yourself. Yeah. And, the things, it's so easy with our romantic partners, especially, even when we're in relationship with them, to point out the things that they're doing that are so destructive or hurtful. And almost always there's some way that that's mirroring back to us, either something that we're doing or some sort of deficit, some area of healing for us, and my therapist pointed this out to me, because I said, why do you think I keep ending up in these relationships with men who are dishonest? I don't feel like I'm a dishonest person. I'm really honest. I mean, I'm actually maybe sometimes too honest, like people are like, how do you tell all these personal details about yourself online? I'm like, wait, they're personal? I don't know. It doesn't seem that personal to me. But what she mirrored back to me is she said, do you feel like you're honest with yourself? Do you feel like you speak up about what you need and what you want and what really matters to you when you're in a relationship? Or do you feel like you hide behind, do you feel like you know more of what someone else needs and what someone else wants than you know about what you want in a relationship? And that was a wake-up call for me. I thought, you know what? You're really right. I don't know. I think I probably knew what was going on with my ex-husband before I actually knew. I think I knew in my gut, and I don't think I allowed myself to know, because of what it does when we know the truth. I mean, until you know the truth, you can't really make any meaningful change in your life. But in order to know the truth, you have to let go of the facade,
Right. And I think that there's something there of having that instinct, that intuition, and being unwilling to listen to it. So yes. What do you feel like, because I think this is so common, and I felt like this within my marriage, not that I had your same story, but all along where I felt like this isn't right, that I didn't want to be in that anymore. And this doesn't even have to be for marriage. Right. This could be for anything, that we have that little whisper that says, hey, we need to get out of this. We need to say no. We need to protect ourselves, whatever that is. But oftentimes we don't listen to that. So what do you think the fear was for you? Like, if I listen to the voice, what were you telling yourself would be the result of that? What was your story at that time? Yeah,
well, I would lose everything that made me look good on the surface. The joke I always tell, it's kind of a joke, is like, my life looked really good for Instagram. And the minute you come into alignment with what your soul is really telling you is the minute things get messy, they get crazy, they get interesting and amazing, but it doesn't always look as good for Instagram. So, and that's just an analogy of this feeling that I think a lot of us have, where from the outside looking in, people would come up to me at, I was writing books, speaking at conferences, traveling. My ex-husband and I would travel together a lot, and we had started multiple businesses together and had seen a lot of success. So people would come up to us and they would say, like, how do you guys even do it? You're such a power couple. And I think I enjoyed that. I think I enjoyed having people think that I was so successful, or I had it all together, or I had all the answers. And in order to get, to the truth, I was going to have to sacrifice that sort of shimmery outside.
Yeah, your entire identity that you've basically constructed.
Yes.
Yeah. And isn't that so true? I feel like, Instagram life it's the highlight reel.
Yes.
And even if it's not even the highlight reel, it's a fake highlight reel.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're gonna curate that, and so nobody really knows what's going on below the surface. And what happens with that is not only is that a disservice to the people who are following us, it's actually a disservice to ourselves, because we buy into the lie that that's actually our life, and we think we can never be upset, we can never be angry, we can never cry, we can never have doubts, we can never have fears, because I want to be in alignment with what I'm portraying out to the world, and the person that I'm portraying out to the world is perfect. So now I have all this pressure to actually be perfect, and that's not even realistic for anybody. Right.
And what good does it do to have a life that looks good on Instagram if it's miserable to be actually living it? Like, what good does that do?
Yeah. And one of the things that you said I thought was so good when you were mentioning blame. So if, like, we rewind and you're talking about everybody saying, slashes tires, right to be angry. And you chose not to blame him and to look at your part and to say, where can I take responsibility here? Where can I own, not that it's your fault and not that you're putting shame on yourself, but you own the role that you played that got you to this point in life. I want to go deeper into that. So what do you sense that the adverse effects would be from blame? Like, if you're handing over blame to somebody else, what does that rob you of?
Well, it robs me of any control I have to make changes in my life. You know what I mean? So, you mentioned blame and shame. And I think those two things so what happens, I think sometimes, is our fear of accepting accountability and responsibility for where we are in our lives is that as we start to do that, a lot of shame will come up. It's just part of the process. So part of the process is sifting through that shame and reminding yourself, this does not define me. It is not who I am. Like, I may have made mistakes that got me to where I am, but that doesn't mean that's who I am. It doesn't define where I'm going. It doesn't mean that my future is going to mimic my past. In fact, the only way for my future to be any different is for me to look honestly at the mistakes I've made in the past, to recognize those mistakes are separate from me. They are not part of my identity, and that I have the power and control to make different decisions in the future.
Yeah. So you get your power back when you're not blaming. I think that's so key. So one of the things that I see often in my clients, and just people that I talk to, my friends and people that I work with, one of the phrases they'll always use is they'll say, he made me feel so angry, or she's driving me crazy.
Right.
Or it's because of her that I didn't get that opportunity. And so it's as if they're putting the authority of how they feel onto somebody else's shoulders. So let me ask you this. I've been reading a lot about this and studying a lot about blame. Do you think that it's possible that somebody actually has control over how you feel?
Well, I think it's possible for sure. A lot of us give over that power. We hand the keys to other people all day long. I mean, we hand the keys to traffic. It's like we let ourselves get real worked up about the fact that we're sitting in traffic. And I think one of the things that happens with spiritual and emotional growth is you realize, oh, I'm the one who gave away those keys. I can take them back anytime I want. Like, you don't get to make me feel small. You don't get to make me feel belittled. You don't get to make me feel angry. You don't get to make me feel, I'm the one who gets to decide what I feel. And one practice that's been really helpful for me with this is yoga. There's actually a lot of research coming out, more recent research. There's a book by a guy named can never say his name, Bessel van der Kolk, called The Body Keeps Score.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. My sister and I have been talking about this book like crazy.
It's phenomenal. I mean, the research that this man has done is so phenomenal. If you want a taste, there's also an interview he did on a podcast called On Being with Krista Tippett. And that's just a little, like, it's a 45-minute taste of what he talks about in the bigger book. But
can you share the name of the book again?
Yeah, it's called The Body Keeps Score.
Awesome. So in that, you're doing yoga and you're really being able to access that. Like, what did that actually do, or how did that support that healing process for you?
So it gets you back in your
healing process.
I feel about this. I get to choose the narrative that I'm going to tell myself about this situation and this person. So, and the minute that I start making those decisions, it's like I am in the driver's seat of my own life. No one else belongs there. If I put anyone else there, I can't be mad at them. I'm the one who put them there, you know?
Right.
So
what are some of those other mantras that you've had to tell yourself throughout this process that have literally gotten you through some of your darkest moments?
Yeah, the number one, I had a friend say to me in the very beginning of this thing, I called her and I was sobbing on the phone. And she said to me, "You are doing a good job." And I thought, you've got to be joking me. Like I'm like falling apart. I have no idea what to do next. Like I'm barely making it out of bed in the morning. I'm just like, I'm not even eating, you know, I'm stressed out. I need like meds. I'm drinking too much, you know? And she just said, "You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job." 10 times on the phone that day, she said it to me. And that was one thing I adopted and say it to myself like on the days when you feel like you're not doing a good job is the most important time to say it. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. Look at you showing up for your life with your whole heart. You're in it to win it. You know, like you might be making tons of mistakes. You might be failing left and right, but failure is just an education, you know, it's just, so yeah, that's one that I use for myself a lot. You're doing a good job.
And it's so simple because it's not about perfection, like you're doing this perfectly. It's not even you're doing a great job. It's that sweet, compassionate little phrase, like you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Like I always think anytime I do a mantra, I visualize this very nurturing voice, almost like a mother who would come alongside of me and say those things to me. Because sometimes I feel like I can't get to it if it feels like it's coming from my own voice.
Yes.
Because maybe I don't feel like I deserve that grace or deserve to hear that I'm doing a good job. But if I can visualize this other person that's like this precious mother who just sees you for all of your goodness, and there's just so much loving, so much light, so much grace, and she can say, "You're doing a good job. Like, look at you. Look at you. You're grace." And she can say,
I love that.
So powerful.
Another one that I have said to myself a lot, and I want to add this too, that I was sort of a skeptic about mantras and how well they would work. I thought like, well, that's sort of a nice thing to do. Like it can't hurt, right? You know, before all of this happened. And then when everything fell apart, the beautiful thing that happens when you're at rock bottom is like, you'll try anything because you're like, well, it can't get worse than this. So might as well give this a shot. And never before have I been so convinced that the phrases we tell ourselves, the words we tell ourselves, the voices that play on repeat over and over again in our heads are the voices that dictate our lives. So I've never been more convinced of that in my life. And this one has been a huge one for me in the last 18 months. I say to myself over and over again, I am a magnet for love and loving people in my life. I am a magnet for love and loving people in my life. Over and over and over again. And I can't tell you, I mean, I always feel like I've had a lot of really good friends. I've always had a pretty good support system and network around me, but that has been a huge one for me because not only, you know, do I feel like I have really, really supportive friends in my life, but people who just show me love in the most magnanimous, miraculous, you know, like gracious ways. I mean, I don't even know. And the other thing too is that I wanted to make sure, part of why I came up with that mantra 18 months ago was because I wanted to make sure that I didn't walk away from the situation feeling bitter toward men as a gender. Like I didn't want to feel like all men are cheaters or no men are to be trusted. And so I prayed really early on, like that there would be people brought into my life, men specifically brought into my life who would be really kind. And when I go back over the last 18 months and make a list, like I can make a list of 25 men who are husbands of my friends, significant others of my friends, you know, or people who I've met when I'm out speaking, just someone else who's on the speaking circuit who has no reason to be nice to me, but is just overly kind, overly generous with me. It's been really remarkable to see how much that has played a role in those experiences.
And that's so huge, because there's this process that happens when we experience a circumstance that's traumatic on some level. And trauma is just when you have an overwhelming feeling or emotion towards something. It doesn't, there's not things that are not traumatic by the book. It's like how you experience them. Something that's not traumatic to one person can be very traumatic to another person. But people who experience traumatic events, whatever that is, oftentimes they will immediately create a universal belief through it. Like, all men are cheaters, or I hear this so often from women. There are no good men out there.
Yeah.
Right. And I even remember,
I was
you
just
and
thinking about that.
were at an event together with a bunch of single women, and we were going around the table kind of giving you new advice on what it was going to be like to be single. And almost every single one of them said something incredibly negative about the dating scene in Nashville, or how there's no good men. And they were sharing all these horror stories about dating. And I remember calling you. I remember I left early because I just thought, I don't want to absorb any of this that's coming in. I just felt like it was this negative experience. And I remember calling you afterwards and just saying, be really careful before you listen to that and you internalize that, and then it becomes a universal belief for you. And I love what you said, that you went to find proof that the opposite was true. You went to go find proof that there are some incredible men out there, that are some incredible, protective, loving, caring, compassionate men. And that's true for any experience in life. When we experience trauma, the opportunity is to go, now, what do I really want to believe in this situation? Because I'm going to find proof either way. You can find just as much proof that there are men that are horrible, and just as much proof that there are men that are wonderful. Where else do you feel like in this story that you had to sort of shift a temptation of creating a universal belief and then shift it into something positive?
Well, I don't know if this fully answers the question, but one major paradigm shift I had to make was this idea that marriage is some kind of achievement. Like, I feel like in our minds, in this culture, we have this idea that marriage is this threshold that you cross that is an arrival at something, that it's like this trophy that you get. A lot of people will say to single people, for example, even now that I'm divorced, people say this to me all the time. As soon as you get really comfortable being single, as soon as you love yourself, that's when you're going to meet the perfect guy for you. And I'm like, I don't buy that now. I mean, I just think that's sort of, it's not like there's no truth to it, but it's just sort of empty advice, because it puts women especially in this place where we feel like, as soon as I get all my ducks in a row, as soon as I feel really comfortable in my own skin, as soon as I am sexy enough, as soon as I reach my goal weight, as soon as I whatever, and then I'm going to meet this guy. And it's just like, I think the paradigm shift for me is we need a new way, first of all, to define success in a relationship, first of all. Second of all, we're all of us, every single one of us as a human being on this planet, we're working through our intimacy issues. And so, like, attachment issues, we can talk about that a little bit. Like, we're working through primary attachment issues, we're working through intimacy issues. And some of us are doing that single, and some of us are doing it dating, and some of us are doing it married. And it's just, it's sort of arbitrary how you're doing it, because it's not like there's a perfect way to do it. I mean, I talk to women all the time who are married and lonely, and I was very lonely in my marriage. And I know, you and I have talked about that before too.
Yeah.
Being alone or being married doesn't automatically mean that you are not going to be lonely, or that you're going to have all your needs met, or whatever. Life is this process of us figuring out, like, how do I get my needs met? How do I really create the kind of life that I want to live? How do I connect authentically in a way with another human being that feels deep and abiding and, satisfying to me? And sometimes we're doing that in dating relationships, and sometimes we're doing it married, and sometimes we're doing it alone.
Yeah. Well, it's just like anything. You're never going to reach a level where all of a sudden you're perfect enough to get what you want out of life.
Right.
And that was something that was a huge part of my journey, unrelated to marriage, where, when I was 80 pounds heavier than I'm at now, it was like, I can't wait until I lose 80 pounds to be happy.
Yeah.
that who knows if that's going to happen,
Yeah.
and who knows if how long that's going to take. And I have to own where I'm at now and realize, like, whether you're single, whether you're dating, whether you're married, whether you're overweight, whether you're underweight, whether you're successful or not as successful as you want to be, whether you have great friendships in your life or you feel lonely, you at any moment in your life have the opportunity to be happy, to love yourself, and to create a life that is really fulfilling to you. And it has nothing to do with your circumstances. And so I think it's really important, when people come to you and say, well, once you have kids, or once you get married, or once you figure all your stuff out, then XYZ will happen. It's like, I'm not going to wait for XYZ. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that
Totally.
now.
I had this great conversation with a friend of mine who's my age, and she's got 4 kids, and her oldest is 11 or 12 maybe, and then her youngest is 3. And I was telling her one day, this is like when I was a ways through the process. But I was just voicing this insecurity to her, saying, like, I feel like you have really got it. Like, you've got this really wonderful husband who treats you so beautiful. Like, your relationship is so sweet. You've got these kids. You just seem like, and she's starting to get to the place where she can focus a little bit more on her career. And I just said, I feel like you've just got everything, and I sometimes when I talk to you, I said, I feel insecure because you have all the things that I think I should have as a woman at our age. And she said, you know what's so funny, Allie? I think that when I look at you. She said, I feel insecure sometimes, like maybe I had too many kids. Maybe I got married too young. Maybe I waited too long to start my career. Maybe it's really over for me. And I walked away from that meeting with the thought that came over my mind was, I will never be any happier than I am right this very minute. And by that, I mean, like, as happy as I can be when things are not going exactly the way that I want them to be is as happy as I can be when things are going perfectly. Because, if you're happy only when things are going perfectly, then that can be taken from you in an instant. But if you're happy when things aren't going well, then that happiness can never, ever be taken from you. So there's no anxiety about it. It's like, the deep abiding joy that I feel now in my life, there's no anxiety about it going anywhere. Like, I recognize that now. I used to feel this feeling like, oh God, the other shoe's going to drop any day now. I don't feel that anxiety anymore because I know no matter what happens, I know how to navigate these waves with a strength and a focus and just a deep abiding satisfaction that can't be taken.
I love that. Oh, that's so good. Okay. So Lindsay, who's watching, she said, how do I overcome anxiety of a new relationship? She said that she struggled with her husband after her kid's biological father, and she often sees that anxiety coming back up.
Well, so one thing I'll mention, I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm not an expert on this subject, but I do think reading the book, The Body Keeps Score, would be a good read for her because it talks so much about trauma and the effect of trauma on the brain. And what happens when you experience a trauma, especially if it's a repetitive trauma like that, like a relationship that you're in where those behavioral patterns are happening over and over again, those patterns are like, it's like if you think of skis going down a ski slope and the same rut over and over and over again, the ruts get so deep, those neurological pathways get so learned in your mind that even if something really good happens to you, but your brain is used to feeling depressed, it's actually really, really, really hard for your brain to get out of that rut. And Bessel van der Kolk talks about the number one way to heal those neurological pathways they're finding through brain research now is yoga, body movement. Yeah. And it's really just about getting out of your brain because we cannot logic our way out of those ruts. We can only train ourselves. We can only train our bodies to feel different. Does that make sense?
You can't use your cognitive ability once you've experienced trauma to move out of that neurological pathway. And I know that yoga was a huge part of my journey and what created massive healing in my life. And I didn't understand any of the science behind it at the time. It was totally an intuitive process.
Right.
And I started doing yoga when I was 240 pounds. So if anybody's on here and they're going, oh my gosh, I can't do this, or I'm too overweight or whatever, start where you're at.
Yes.
Start now. And I know that for me, that was a huge part of my journey for this. And so I think that there is such an opportunity to use the body to access stored emotions, like physically moving it out of your body,
right.
To retrain it so it's not just falling into those ruts over and over again.
And if that's, you know, if the neurological pathways think all that research they're showing now is true, if it's real, if it's really more about your limbic brain than about your prefrontal cortex, then there are multiple ways to get to your limbic brain. I mean, I would say as a writer, like writing is a great way to get to your limbic. It's a great way to get to that part of your brain that can only, you know, that's less linear, it's less logical, it's more your dreaming brain, your animal brain, your instinct brain. There's a great book by Julia Cameron called The Artist's Way that she talks about doing morning pages. And that's a great way to tap into that part of your brain. The things you think that you don't even know you think, you can get to that through an activity like writing, journaling, therapy, if you can afford it. And I have been so many times when I didn't think I can afford it. You know, EMDR is a new technique, an eye movement technique that they're using now to help you get to that part of your brain. What's another one? Any kind of creativity, art, you know, painting, music. There are, you know, I think there are enough. There are dozens of ways that we can use to get to that part of our brain. So whatever, find what works for you. Start with something small, do what you can afford, and then work from there.
I love that. Well, kind of coming into a close for our time together, which I feel like you and I could
we could go on forever.
We could go on forever, and there's so many things that I feel like we didn't get to, so you'll have to come back on. But what do you feel like for the people that are watching and for my audience? What has been your biggest empowering takeaway through this journey that you've been on?
Oh, I only get to pick one.
Today, only one today.
I mean, well, I think I'll say this. The all-encompassing thing is that the kind of love that we are hungry for and craving is a kind of love that exists. There's this great quote by, let me look it up really fast. It's on my phone because that's how much I look at it, by Rainer Maria Rilke, who is a German poet that I love. And he basically says, let me find this. I hope you don't mind that I'm doing this.
No, go for it. Please hold while we're finding the
right?
quote.
I know. This is... Oh, dang it.
While you're finding that.
Yeah, thank you.
Keep doing that.
I feel like this is important enough that
No, it's great. So while we're finding that, here's where you can find Allison. So on Instagram at Allie Fallon, on Facebook, Allison Fallon _writer. So if you search that, you'll find her, and AllisonFallon.com. So make sure you take a screenshot of this because you absolutely want to hang out and connect with her off of this show. She is just, she is a beautiful writer, and I love that you're bringing up poetry because I know you write your own poetry, Allie, and it's just amazing. And definitely follow her, like her, stay connected with her, get on her email list. She is incredible. Okay, so you ready for that now?
The ultimate, the last test, and the work for which all other work is but preparation. And this is my favorite part. He says, but do not expect any understanding. Believe in a love that is being stored up for you like an inheritance, and have faith that in this love, there is a strength and a blessing so large that you can travel as far as you wish without ever having to step outside of it. And I think that for me has been the biggest takeaway from this, which is like married, not married, single, not single, kids, no kids, you know, business, no business, whatever it is, like the love that is so big that no matter how far you travel, you can't step outside of it. That love is possible, available in as much quantity as you can handle, as much as you can let it in. And the work is less about performing to try to earn that kind of love and more about like, how soft can I get that I can let that more and more and more of that love into my life.
Oh my gosh. I love that. And I love your journey and your willingness to narrate your own life. I think that, you know, as a writer, it's so fitting, but I know that that is a skill that you've learned, that I talk about, that we practice and talk about behind the scenes all the time, is being the narrator of your own life, and choosing the story, choosing what you're telling yourself about what's happening, making sure that you like the interpretation that you're giving your circumstances, because you can change that at any time. And you're such a beautiful example of going, the temptation here would be to blame, to give all the power to somebody else, to have all these universal beliefs that only at the end of the day are going to leave me frustrated, lonely, and angry. And for you to be able to recognize that and to give yourself the time and the space for the healing, and to choose so beautifully and so intuitively and so wisely the narrative of your life. I know this to be true because I've seen it in you. It's given your power back, and you radiate, you glow. You were one of those people that I just gravitate to, and I always want to be around. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
I want to say really fast too, you have played such a huge role in this for me. I mean, I think that it's so true what people say, that the people you spend the most time with, you become the most like. And even as I'm telling this story on here, I'm realizing all these moments that you played such a key role in helping me move from seeing things this way to seeing things a new way. Even that night. Fallon.com.
My computer's running so slow because I've got all these programs. But anyways, .com, and we will see you, obviously, or I will see you next week. Super excited to be with you. And I want to leave you with my favorite saying. I say this every single time, but the purpose of life